Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander. So today on the show, I am very excited to welcome my kind of neighbor, not too far away in Jersey. I'm over here in Forest Hills, who's Steve Guberman. So Steve has over 25 years in the creative marketing, advertising, and PR industry, including a decade spent running and eventually selling his own successful agency. Steve now channels his expertise into coaching agency clients. As the founder of Agency Outsight, Steve helps owners unearth their challenges, define their goals, and conquer them all, enabling them to build and run the agencies of their dreams, which sounds awesome, man. So great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here. Love seeing you, man.
Yeah, likewise. I guess first off, would you mind talking a little bit more about your journey? You don't have to go back to the very beginning, but one thing I'd love to dig into is what made your agency attractive back then to sell, and how do you think that would change today if you were going to sell your agency all over?
I mean, honestly, so when it was time for me to sell, I was ready to just shut the doors. We hadn't gotten to a place where other shops were knocking on our door. I was burnt out. I had just gone through a divorce, and we had just lost our largest agency of record client. I had to lay people off for the first time. For all intents and purposes, we were like a wounded ship. And I had a really tough time from a self-confidence and self-esteem standpoint closing new business. And so I sat my team down and I said, I'm just kind of burnt and think I'm going to shut the doors. If you want this thing, I'll turn it over to you. And I was offered a really high-level marketing job at a telecom company. And my brother, who's one of my chief confidants, he said, dude, you will kill yourself if you go corporate. And reminded me that I built something that was, had some value to it. And so I spent the next 6 to 9 months kind of shoring up the dams and building out a pipeline and starting to do biz dev. And then I shopped the agency around to other agencies who didn't do what we do. I identified 9 or 10 agencies in my network. It wasn't cold outreach. It was people I knew for 20 years who PR, package design, industries we weren't in, but they're complete and total complements to what we were. And that was the attraction, was here's an agency that's got really strong success, strong profitability, strong client retention. Not everything was project-based, so the key indicators of what makes up for a successful agency, that was really attractive.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. It's interesting. There's a few places we could go with that. I think one of them that jumped out to me is this confidence thing, right? Because we work with lots of agencies. A lot of them have been around for years. They have this track record. They really do great work, but then they kind of forget about it. I think we all kind of run up against that, especially on the sales front, because at the end of the day, you have these metrics in your marketing world, this dashboard of things that tell you if you're doing well, like your subscribers, the dollars, but it doesn't really map to how you're feeling, and especially if you're the one on the front lines of sales and so on. So without just going into I don't know if you saw Stuart Smalley, that sketch on SNL back in the day where the guy just looked in the mirror and said, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, gosh, not people like me. Without going all the way into that realm, what do you think agency owners can do to build confidence? When you are, on the rocks, what are some of those things that you help people with in the masterminds to get them back to it?
Man, that's a really good question. I loved that skit, by the way. I identified with it because I suffer from really low self-esteem. I mean, I've done some trainings that have helped me walk through some of that imposter syndrome that I think most people face, if not everybody faces at some point or another. Why would anybody hire me? Why would anybody date me? Why would anybody whatever? I'm not good enough. How did I get here? What if they find out who I really am? And so as simple as hanging sticky notes on your mirror and being like, hey, you've done something right today just by showing up, or, you are Stuart Smiley. I am worthy. People love me and we do great work. And for me, a lot of those moments are literally just moments. And when I remind myself that, look at what I've done prior to this moment, there's a track record of success and helping other people and being of service and great work and, being a good leader. Having those reminders to get me through those moments of your total garbage pail and over that hump into, hey, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to crush this pitch, or have the confidence to knock on a door or send out some cold emails or do those things to keep plugging into the dashboard, like you said. I think we just have to remind ourselves that they are just moments and they'll pass like everything else.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. A couple of things have helped me for what it's worth. I guess one is if you have some reminder of the wins you have gotten, then when you do fall prey to imposter syndrome, whatever, it's almost like it's not just like you're doing yourself a disservice. You're actually rejecting everybody else that gave you a positive vote. So you're actually telling those people that they're wrong as well.
Right.
So I think that's interesting. Another is like that is tougher to get around is just this recency bias, right? Because like we're only as good as our last deal or our last happy client or whatever it might be. I think this is probably more relevant now because I'd love to hear what you're hearing, but like there seems to be a lot of unhappy agencies now. There's a lot of uncertainty and, economy down, election year, World War III, whatever. Pick your poison.
God, I hope not. I think we're calling it Civil War, not World War III, but yeah. Okay.
Civil War, well, yeah, various macro, micro, local, global wars. First off, I'd love to hear like how is that affecting your clients, and are you seeing the same thing we seem to be?
By and large, it's been a down year. So just to timestamp this, it's, we just started Q4 2024. I think most shops came into this year on an upswing, and it quickly turned into a downswing through summer, and it's been a pretty rough second half of the year so far. That said, I do believe there's a saturated market of agencies thanks to COVID. A lot of people were let go from corporate, open up their own shop, whether it's a solopreneur or a full-on agency or whatever you want to call it. And so I think the market is saturated, and I think this will level the playing field quite a bit, which we need. This happened again in 08. So this is, I don't know, this is cyclical. I'm not a historian. I think some guys like Nick from Promethean can answer that better than I can. But I do think this is a trend. I do think, we're going to have a strong end to the year, and we're going to come into next year. I mean, job market is strong as heck. They just lowered the interest rate, which should put money back into corporate, which should put money back into agencies. The trickle-down effect, if you want to call it that. So I think we're going to start seeing a turn, but it's been a rough year. I mean, agencies last year at this time were looking to hire. I couldn't find talent. There was a bust of work coming into agencies last year, and this year it's just not as much. So I think they have to think differently about positioning and outreach and squeezing more juice from not necessarily their team, because that's not great for morale, but more juice from their clients, frankly. And showing more value and showing up better and all the things to make themselves valuable and relevant.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I have a habit of overthinking this stuff and going to historical or macro with it.
Okay, yeah.
But I think your points are probably more helpful. I think, there is something to the agency market becoming saturated or mature is the word I think like Marcel used when I interviewed him the other day.
Yeah.
Where there's fewer, but I think the misinterpretation of that is thinking, oh, I have a bad business then. I have some business that can't be successful. When the reality is you can be very successful in a mature market. So I think that's a great point. I think part of it's like, oh, we want to get back to 2020-ish levels, which was this anomalous boom, right?
Yep.
And there's that kind of cyclical mindset of, I wish I could get back there. And then I think on an even greater, maybe even like a societal level, there's this idea of like, things aren't as good as I was told they were going to be. This idea that like, we're all just going to keep going up in growth at all times. And that would be cool. I wish it was the case, but it hasn't been like that in the grand scheme of human history for very long. Like this idea that things would just keep growing and getting better is something that happened for a brief period of time, mostly in the 20th century.
But I think there's two important things there. One is that 2021 was an anomaly year. We don't want to go back to that for so many reasons, right? So if you think about major vertical markets were obliterated, in-person events, experiential marketing, food and beverage services, like massive, massive sectors were obliterated. And so agencies that were deeply niched in any of these markets, they shut their doors. Other agencies were able to kind of use other tent poles and say, we're going to lean on this industry and support this other industry. And so we're going to do free work, and that's great. And we're going to, and that's super noble. And I honor the heck out of that. So it was either you were gone or you were through the roof in new business, right? In 2020. There was no norm to that. So we need to look at 2019 as that was the last norm. That was what we should be looking for trend relationship to. But even if every year you grow 20, 30%, there's got to be a year where you level off and say, we need to reevaluate. We've grown every year, 5, 10, 20, 30% top line revenue, AGI, whatever you want to call it. There's got to be a time where we stop and we like unintentionally grow and level off and say, are our resources still aligned with the revenue and the size that we are? Are our policies and procedures and SOP, like all of that, is it still in line with the growth that we've seen over the past 5 years? Because if you grow that much year over year for enough years, you can't rely on what you did 3, 4 years ago to still be successful in delivery and how you're, in the ways you're getting things done. So like you asking that question made me think like these are two massive things that need to be taken a look at.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I remember, I've been on probably thousands of sales calls over the years with agencies. We're largely helping them with business development and setting up outreach programs and stuff. And I would ask people like, hey, what are your goals? What are you going for? The usual sales questions. And in the early years, probably roughly till 2020, maybe 2020 is such a big year that I'm moving that goalpost, ex post facto. But people would really want to grow. Like that was the thing. It was like the Gary V vibe and everything was kind of heading towards that, like hockey stick go up. And then since then, it's much less common to experience that type of agency owner. It's much more, I want to have security. I want to get out from under these guerrilla clients. I want to save for this thing. I want to go home on time. How does that compare to what you're seeing in your masterminds and so on?
I still see a mix, and the former is so toxic. And I don't necessarily, I used to say like, oh, the copycat of Gary V's, and I mad respect for him, and I love what he's done. He's a Jersey guy, and so I fully respect all that. But there was this toxicity of, are you making 7 figures a month and blah, blah, blah. And if not, you suck. And then owners are like, well, that's what I've got to do. And so I don't think he's on that vibe so much anymore. He's really doubled down on like the happiness factor of what are you building and why are you building it? And is it true to you? And that's what I chase, man. Like I want to support owners who are not doing copycat goals, who are finding goals that are true to themselves. Because if they're true to them, then the authenticity rings true to their team and the work that they're doing. And everybody's got a better life from that. And now I blame like the Hermoses of the world who are like, if you're not, husband and wife making 9 figures a month and blah, and I want to like destroy that entire mindset. It's not authentic to anybody. Yeah. I believe that agencies that are focused on good work, authentic goals and values and strong delivery, that's what success is. Coaches that we both know that have these cookie cutter 92 steps to fill in the blank programs are not chasing authentic goals for owners. And I don't have the market cornered on that at all. There's a lot of people pushing that out, and I think it's important that we elevate that because the industry in and of itself is toxic. Back to like the Mad Men side of the world, and I'm going to go on a rant here of like working 90 hours a week and booze and smoking and whatever, and like that's not the norm today, thankfully, but still the overdrive mindset is still the norm. And so when we stop delivering free work and we start doing proper account management and communication and setting the boundaries of what our limits are as a team of we're not available on weekends unless there's an emergency and no, you can't contact me when I'm on vacation and let's take some cues from Europe and actually take vacation and things like that. Like now we've got healthy people on our team who can help us achieve the goals that are authentic to the owners and the visionaries of the team. So kind of a rant, and I don't know if that like fully compounds your question or not, but I'm passionate as hell about that stuff, man. It's
yeah, no, those are one of my favorite topics. What I think is interesting is there's a lot of talk about like you should build your company around your own goals, which I agree with. Of course, that's great. I think where things get messier is that a lot of us don't know what our own goals even are, right? Because like we don't know what's ours versus what is mimetic, and pretty much everything is mimetic. We want what other people want. And parsing that is sometimes difficult. And sometimes it's clear, sometimes like there can be goals that are more or less authentic to you, but we all kind of get them from somewhere. And what I find interesting is the popular models for entrepreneurship are downstream of the culture, right? And then changes over time. Like I remember when I started my business, what was really cool was Tim Ferriss. He was the guy. And I still love Tim because it's now becoming a little bit more in vogue because after we had 2020, everybody went remote. So Tim's had this like his ideas, even though they're literally tactically dated, but like overall his ideas have had this massive resurgence. And I also think that Hormozi has kind of had this ascendance because he's channeling nihilism in a way. He's a nihilist, for better or worse. I'm not saying that's he is who he is, but his idea is you work for the sake of work. You don't work for the American dream. You don't work for the big house, even though you get that. It's a very Japanese concept. Okay. So what I find super interesting is that that's what's latched on. It's not you're working so that you can build something so you can go to the beach or have a family. It's you're working for work. So that's my rant. Let me give you the floor.
and listen, if that's what's in somebody's heart, cool, chase the hell out of it, build a system and make it happen. It does not align with me. There was a stage in my life when it would have. When I had my agency for the first probably 7 or 8 years, yeah, I was hustle culture and I was, 60, 70 hours a week. And I loved the all night, Rage Against the Machine blasting on the agency speaker system and cranking out creative. And that's not the phase of my life I'm in now. And I don't align with that any longer. And it took a series of massive events to shift that mindset for me. So, if that aligns for people, cool. I'm not going to throw shame on it. Maybe I did a little bit, but
No, I mean, like, I think we're all going to throw shame on, whatever falls outside of our value system at that given moment. And I also think that it can be seasonal. Like, you can have different modes and it doesn't have to be for forever. To bounce around in time a little bit, I do want to get back to your journey. So you talked about, selling the agency and what you went through there. What came next and how did you get to the consulting practice?
My agency was acquired by a traditional PR firm. They were at the time 30 years old and they didn't have a creative arm. So they acquired us. We went in-house for them and started doing creative for their clients and cross-pollinating. I spent 5 years there, and it was a really good 5 years transforming a PR agency into a full-service comm shop. And at the end of the day, I just, they were looking for PR retainers and they were giving away creative and things like that just didn't align. And I truly feel that traditional PR is a breed of its own. And I don't think you can ever laundromat that out of that culture. And so I left there with kind of an ego mindset of I'm going to go back to corporate. I started my career in-house at Panasonic. And so I said, all right, I'm going to go back to corporate, spend the second half of my career there and retire out as a CMO from somewhere top level or whatever. And so it was very ego driven. In hindsight, it was not the right move for me, but all things happen the way they're supposed to. And so I took a job at a mid-level tech company with a philanthropical arm. They were essentially buying used tech from corporate, refurbishing it and selling it back into the consumer marketplace. And they found that most of the consumer acquisitions were done by people at or below poverty level. And so I joined there in January of 2020. And I was promised full autonomy over the market, the message, the brand, the events, the outbound, the call center, literally everything, only to find out that the CEO micromanaged the hell out of every aspect of the business, including my arm. So I had zero autonomy and was micromanaged. But we were the best positioned once COVID hit and every kid in America needed a Chromebook or a tablet or whatever. And so we were in the right place at the right time, not to make a ton of money, but to really help a lot of people. And so I was all in on that. How do we be in the right position to help? A month before COVID hit, I lost my daughter unexpectedly at 13 years old. So I stopped working. And by the time I started going back to work, COVID hit, we were all remote. And I was just done with the toxicity of the workplace, had not really given myself enough time to ground and grief and feel and just be where I needed to be and deal with my son. And so I quit the job with nothing lined up and spent a couple months in the garden, literally just exploring and figuring out what could be next. And when it was time for me to start working again, I started doing contract consultancy work for agencies, setting up CRMs, doing technical consulting for biz dev projects for biz dev, literally whatever people in my network needed. And I don't want to say I had no concept, but coaching was not on my radar. I had coaches. I had worked, as part of mastermind groups before. But in 1 week, 3 different agency owners, unconnected, all said, hey, you should talk to Kelly Campbell. She used to be an agency owner. Now she does coaching. She's an awesome human being. You guys would get along great. And I ended up saying, getting on a call with her, and she downloaded her journey to me and inspired the hell out of me. And I probably hung up my shingle that week or, something like that. So I spent a year learning and making mistakes and, coaching people that were very close to me for little to no money and building out my process and understanding what works and what doesn't work and jumping in other coaches' back pockets. And fast forward last month, kicked off my 5th year, and 50 plus agencies later, it's just been an absolute whirlwind and dream. I can't even call it a job. Well, I don't know. What do I call it? Like a dream assignment. I live in and out of work. I'll say this. Out of work, I believe in living a life of service, giving back to others that are, in need in whatever way or less fortunate or whatever. This job, and I'll call it a job for simplicity's sake, allows me to be of service in the industry that I know so intimately and that I'm so passionate about. because like we just said, there's so many agency owners on burnout route or already in burnout or wandering around aimlessly trying to find their version of success, working too much, not making any money, working with the wrong clients, like whatever their challenges are. I've got an opportunity to be of service to help them right that wrong. And when they've got a better agency and they're living a better life, think about the trickle down effect to their team, their families, the work that they're doing for their clients, the impact that that has on their clients' lives. And I don't want to like put this on any level of like, hey, you're curing cancer or putting man on the moon or whatever, but like the impact of bringing happiness and some success into people's lives. I mean, I'm super grateful to be able to do that on a daily basis. And it's changed my life massively. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's my story.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It sounds like that is a really meaningful way to get to where you are now. I guess with that in mind, like one thing that came to mind when you were talking is it seems like burnout comes up a lot in the agency space, but then again, I've been here for 14 years, so I don't know what to compare it to. And you were in corporate before this. Do you think that burnout is just the nature of entrepreneurship across the board? Or do you think that it's especially worse in the agency creative services space?
I same as you. I've been in this industry for 25 years, so I don't know the other industries out. Sure, you look outside and you see landscapers; they're working 30 hours a day, and so I'm sure there's lots of industries that also have burnout culture. I just think it's particularly horrible and all too often subscribed to, and it doesn't need to be the norm.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I guess like as I've gone further along in my business, I develop more of a sixth sense for when it's coming or when I'm doing things that are going to lead to that later. Or I'll just do this. Oh, I'll just take over this task. I can handle that. I guess how do you see that playing out with your clients? And to get as tangible as possible, I guess like what do you see as the biggest leading indicators of burnout?
I think it's very individualized and depends on the season of where people are in their career, right? So early on, I would work 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, no problem. I'd put the kids to bed. My wife at the time and I would sit on the couch with our laptops and we'd still be doing work. Do you know what I mean? So, and that was okay. I've seen owners later on in their careers as their kids are more active, not want to work as much. Rightfully so. They shouldn't. They should be there with their kids. Or number, 2 and 3 of their kids' therapy session is dad was never there or mom was never there because they were always working, right? So it depends on what their priorities are in their life. I've presented ideas to owners that say, hey, maybe you don't want to work Friday so you can go surfing or play golf. And they're like, no, why would I want to take a day off when I could be doing more work? And that's okay. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that. I think burnout happens when we're ignoring our emotions. We're ignoring the things that we previously said are top priority. We're not taking time to rebalance ourselves. I threw something on in some Slack groups I'm in and up on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago on a Monday, like, hey, who worked this weekend? And not to say that working on the weekends is a bad thing or anything. It's more of like, if you're chained to your agency and you have to work weekends, there's a problem there. Let's figure that out. If you are grabbing your laptop and sitting outside on a Saturday because that's your zone of genius time and you get to find freedom to write or do your passion project or do that thing, awesome. I fully support that stuff. But it's that former that I'm talking about, that like, being caught in that trap, that's not healthy. It just isn't healthy, and there's ways around that and there's ways to figure out how to avoid that. So to me, it's like a trapping of emotions, ignoring my priorities, doing a disservice to the values that I believe in and the way that I want to live. And even you can attribute it to like, oh, I see, my peers with other agencies doing this, that, and the other thing. And so there's that, like, I want what Susan's got, you know what I mean? And that's okay too. But then how are you honoring that? And what are you doing to move towards that lifestyle?
Yeah, I think you touched on something I've thought a lot about, which is interesting. I don't know if like maybe it's the Inuits or even if it's apocryphal, they have like supposedly have like whatever 10 words for ice, right? And we have one word for work. We have the word work. I mean, like if you were writing the great American novel or you're putting data into a spreadsheet, it's the same verb, more or less. You could have a million other verbs for that specific task you're doing. But from the outside looking in, though, for the people around you, family, friends, etc., they just see you on a laptop, right? Yeah. It looks the same no matter what. And it's the same amount of unavailability. So, but I think it's a good thing to parse. To shift gears a little bit, I know that you talk a lot about business development and particularly like getting owners out of the sales seat. Can you talk about that? Is there a process that you've seen or an order of operations that you've seen from making that happen with the agencies you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, so typically an owner gets caught up in the seat of biz dev because it's their name that the business is built upon. It's their relationships that the business is built upon. And so transitioning that is typically the last thing an owner needs to like let go of in order to kind of have that hands-off scenario. Obviously, the first thing is systematizing a sales process, as you know, like that's so essential. So what are the steps that are taken for somebody to find a lead, nurture a lead, eventually close a lead, and what that process looks like? And it's not just a CRM, but it's like a series of steps of communications and nurturing, and we send out a gift here and there, and we do these kinds of things. But then it's taking the relationship development process off the owner's plate and putting it in somebody else's plate who can evangelize what the agency does and who they are and what the values, and go out, whether it's networking events or ideally in-person things, but doing outreach on behalf of the agency. And you'll start to see that. So let's say the owner is responsible for 100% and you bring somebody in and now they're responsible for 10% and then 20%. And you'll start to see that person or that team, take over more and more of the revenue generation. It's a slow process. I don't think it's an overnight thing. It's not an easy thing. I think it's one of the hardest things to shift off of the owner's plate, but it's one of the most essential. And when you see that an agency can operate without the owner, that's sweet. But when the agency can grow without the owner, and I remember when that happened in my shop for the first time, blew my mind. Like somebody closed a deal while I was on vacation. I was like, oh my God, that is a massive shift in what is possible, because now the owner has true freedom to develop vision and what's next for the agency and like true growth for the agency. Yeah.
I agree with all that. I think what we've seen with ourselves and lots of our clients, and like we've failed at hiring for sales and getting myself out of the sales seat probably like 4 times, been successful 1.5 times. But successful, what does that even mean? Or else I wouldn't still be doing it. I think it's almost like the success we had was almost like if you ever go surfing, you sort of catch a wave, like the wave starts to take you, but then like you don't quite have it enough to fully get up on the board. Yep. It was like that. So I think for us, and then we see this, for our clients as well, a big part of that is honestly like getting more lead flow than you need, having more simplicity in the offer than you think you need. Because like the owner has to do it first, and then whoever takes over is going to have a harder time at it than the owner. So it's like there really has to be a powerful wave to power that surfboard, basically.
Well, typically the owner is feeling out a lead and saying, what can I sell here? Or what do they really need? And it's not commoditized, thankfully. But to your point, like, how do we simplify it so that somebody else can come in and say, here's what we do and here's the solution we provide, and it answers this pain point that you have. Maybe that person starts as they're setting the meetings or they're the door opener, and the owner is still the closer. And over time, they're able to transition that person into being the closer. But to your point, what does success mean? Is it getting more leads in the funnel, or more proposals out there, or increasing our close rate, or some metric like that?
Yeah, exactly. And to dig further into that, I guess like when you're digging into biz dev process and sales with agencies, like what are some of those common mistakes that you see?
Man, we've grown so much, and it's all through referrals, so we're good. Like that is, and listen, I was guilty of that too. Referrals and word of mouth is 90% of all agencies. That's how they've grown, and they, get in the rut of relying on that. And it's just not, you can't strategize or growth or even any revenue goals around referrals. They're not reliable. So that's probably the biggest red light that I see. The other is, based on what season they're at and what size they're at, are they still using old systems? Are they still relying on the whiteboard versus first it's the whiteboard for their pipeline, then it's the Google sheet, and then it's an actual CRM. Like the failure to grow with what your systematic needs are, I think, is a big one.
Yeah, to go into that a little bit, what I actually see is like what you describe: whiteboard, Google sheet, and then it's like jumping 100 feet in the air up to a HubSpot setup. Where it's like, no. Like you're getting an 18-wheeler to move your 1-bedroom apartment, and then it overwhelms people, and then they don't do anything.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people are like, yeah, we set that up. We haven't logged into it in a year. And it's like, well, do something else then. If that's not working for you, do what works for you. There's super simple CRMs. There's one that plugs into like your Gmail. I can't remember what it's called. But like
Streak. Yep.
Streak. Yeah. It's like stupid simple. I'm still a big fan of a spreadsheet. Like, why not? The data's right there. You can manipulate the heck out of it. But at some point, you've got to outgrow that. or at some point you may outgrow that, I should say.
Right. And the issue is a lot of times people will go down these rabbit trails with CRMs and with software. And also, even if they just jump, even if they're getting these blueprints from different consultants and stuff, so much of what pervades the sales consulting space is based around like the tech industry. It's based around selling products, getting people on demos. Even if it's not directly for that, it's often influenced by that. Like you need to contact somebody 100 times and it's, do these things to get them on a call. When an agency might just need like at most an appointment per day, and that's like on the highest level to get to where they need to be. Their total addressable market might be like a few thousand companies, at most. So I just don't think there's been enough of a template or of a model for building a system for that. And then the other constraint is even in big agencies, 50, 200 person agencies, there's sometimes just one person at most dedicated to sales, and that person's busy and working on proposals and all that other stuff.
But even at the simplest level, they can have sales support with somebody that's doing the proposals for them while they're, nurturing leads and things like that. I think a good system needs to remind creative professionals to follow back up with so-and-so and check back in with so-and-so. Like even the free version of HubSpot, you set a task and say, in a month, follow back up, or in a week, follow back up. Because most creative professionals are ADHD on some kind of level. And if they're not given a reminder to follow up on a proposal, that thing is dead and somebody else has the business. So like one downside to a spreadsheet is there's no reminder system of, hey, check back in on the proposal you sent out last week, or the deal that so-and-so said, check back in with me in 2 weeks. So I think that is an essential thing to have for like the cadence of when that kind of stuff happens. I think Pipedrive does it pretty well as well. Bonsai does it really well. There's a handful that will do it very well on a simple level.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think when we're talking about systems, there's the software side, the widgets that are doing the things, and there's also the people and the time management side, which I often think is more important. So, if we're thinking about an agency, like maybe one that you're working with that's in the process of trying to get the owner out of the sales seat, they're not ready to hire that salesperson yet. So it's the owner doing this with other stuff. Is there a system that you've seen work really well for managing that time and for setting aside, hey, for this amount of time, I'm going to work on these sales tasks and these other things and so on?
Yeah, and I like that you separate like the idea of procedure versus software as a system. And so I'm a big fan of time blocking. I think if you put time on your calendar that says every Monday from 9 to 10, I'm sending out emails, and every Tuesday from 2 to 3, I'm checking AR, like time blocking as a system is essential. But then you have to honor the time, because it's real easy to say, well, that hour that I put on there, I can easily just go play tennis or something. Like I can ignore it. Nobody's holding me accountable to it. But in the long run, your team is holding you accountable, because if you don't have the pipeline, you don't have the revenue, and you don't have the business, you're letting somebody go. But a tool that supports systems as simple as a Google sheet or a Word doc that says, here's how we nurture leads. Here are the steps that we take to get inbound leads. Here's what we do after we go to a networking event or a conference with the leads that we get. These are the 9 things that we do when we get a business card at a networking event. All of that is vital to pass the torch of sales from the owner to anybody else that comes in, because the owner's built success upon what they do up to that point. Now, how do you document it? And so super simple, use a Google Sheet or a Word doc. You can build out a process in Notion, which is really easy to do. Asana even allows for building out processes that have dependencies that says, if you do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. So getting it out of the owner's brain is like the first step to starting to transition that set of processes out.
Yeah. And I think that the best starting place is what's actually been working and even if it's all referral based, it's like, well, what's getting the referrals? Are you going to events? And then those are reminding people that you exist. And then, so like start there. Don't start on the thing that somebody over there is doing that has an amazing template for you to use and so on.
Yeah. I mean, great point. Listen, if you've built your business on referrals, be more proactive with it. I have a download on my resources page. It's a template of a process on how to ask for referrals properly, because so many people just wait for them to come in. But if that's your success story, cool, lean into it. Start asking for referrals. And here's the way to do it. You know what I mean? So yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with you there.
Yeah. And like to give an example, when we're helping agencies with outreach, a lot of the times they come in with, hey, I want to set up this crazy funnel that involves like SMS and all this cold outreach and stuff. And we're like, But you're going to events 3 times a year. Like, what if you just set up some meetings before the event? We could figure out who's there, who's in that town, and we figure out who's going to the event. Like, let's just do that. That seems to be working. So it's kind of just like adding fuel to the fire of the thing that's already working really well.
Is that when they're at 0 and they're like, yeah, we want to go from here to now we want to do SMS and billboards and blimps and skywriting? They want to go from 0 to 100?
Yeah, exactly. Or they just have this idea from somebody else that's doing something over there that's not what they're doing. Right. So it's like, when you go to a doctor, they're like, okay, we want your levels to be like a marathon runner, but at the end of the day, like you have a baseline and the goal is to keep increasing that baseline, right?
But that goes back to what we said is it's got to be authentic to the voice of that agency or the vision of that owner. And it can't just be, well, I see my friend who's got an agency over here and he's doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, he's got 20 more people than you have, Sharon. Like you can't compare the two. Where are you and what's your baseline? And that's what people forget to do. So I love that you said that, man. That's so vital.
Yeah, it's kind of like I often make cheesy jujitsu and grappling metaphors, but when I was a white belt, I learned more from purple belts than I did from black belts, right? Because they were just closer. They remember what it was like to not be good at a certain thing.
Interesting.
So there's something to. I've heard other people phrase that, the purple belt mentality. So no, that's all good stuff. I guess the next thing from there is like talking a little bit about building these lead gen systems, because I think this is where people get really caught up and have a lot of analysis paralysis in terms of what to do. So like, you're an owner running sales, you get your business from referrals. We don't have to get into the specialization rabbit hole. Let's just say that you're decently specialized. You have a track record in one or a couple different industries. How are you deciding where you're going to focus for the next 6-12 months? Like what channels you're going to be using to build this scalable system?
I think there's a few ways to answer that. So the first is that I think it's vital to reverse engineer the goals and say, if I want to have my top line revenue be let's use $1 million as a round number, how much business do I need to be pitching? And how many people do I need to meet in order to pitch that many proposals? Then where do I meet those people? And like, that's the key number to figure out, where am I supposed to be spending my time? The where am I supposed to be spending my time answer is really, if it's the owner doing it, where are they most comfortable? I wouldn't suggest, hey, if you hate writing, you should become a blogger, because it's never going to happen. So why recommend an avenue that they're going to resist it? It's what's comfortable for them. Are they a networker? Are they an extrovert? Do they belong on a trade show floor working 1,000 booths and meeting 1,000 people? Like, so that to me, that's the right way to do it, is what are the different avenues? But then also, who are you bringing in to help support you? I'm not a great writer, and I'm the first to admit it. I struggle with writing. And so even when like the PR shop I was at, everybody took a turn writing a blog post for our corporate thought leadership program. I like nearly went to the edge of, I'm going to pay somebody to write my blog post for me, but don't tell anybody. Like, that's just how much I struggle with it. But that doesn't mean that your leadership team can't be blogging to elevate the agency. That doesn't mean that your account team can't be putting content on social media if that's where they focus. So one major thing to answer is who's doing the work and what's their area of comfort, zone of genius, thing that they love doing. And the second is, where is the audience, right? And you mentioned like the total attainable audience earlier. I forget what the phrase that you used, but like, what's the saturatable market? And like, where are those people? If I'm deeply niched in aerospace engineering, well, then I better be at every aerospace engineering event in the country, because it's such a small niche that I can't afford to lose any business from it to my competitors, right? But if I'm CPG, well, that's a huge, huge niche, and I can probably like not be at every single event. Do you know what I mean? Like, so where's the audience, and kind of intersect that with where I feel the most comfortable / who's going to support me on my team.
The feeling that I get is that as, the world churns and the world gets more specialized and there's more price pressure and the markets are getting more mature, more saturated, markets are getting smaller, right? So like that aerospace agency might be in a better spot than the one that's working with, I don't know, B2B tech writ large. But how do you feel about that?
I think it's fully like evolutionary. Like, I think that changes, cyclically and on a very regular basis. I love the trend that we're starting to see. Ad Age put an article out about this, that small shops are getting large brands now, or large brands are shifting to smaller shops, I should say, is what they're seeing. So whether it's a very small niche, like micro niche industry, or these larger companies that are leaning into the smaller agencies, I think that that's a really cool trend we're seeing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. To shift gears a little bit, so you've run a lot of masterminds. What does it take to put on a great mastermind? What are some of the questions you put out there?
Oh man. So I started facilitating masterminds of agency owners about 3 or 4 years ago. I absolutely love it. Like it's a block of time that I look forward to, slash I need to build in more bio breaks, but I leave those calls after facilitating 6, 7, 8 agency owners. And I'm jacked up to like, let's go run a marathon. And I'm not even a runner. So that's not really a good analogy, but like the energy that comes out of it is massive. And it really comes down to the chemistry of the people that are in a room. It's not even questions that I ask because we follow an agenda. The chemistry of the people that are in a mastermind group is essential. And, they've got to all have lack of competitive spirit. They've got to have a spirit of transparency and vulnerability and willingness to support and help each other. And when you mix the right people that have those same core values, that just want to elevate the ship and help everybody and be a part of somebody else's success, it's wildfire, man. It is super contagious and really magical what happens there.
And I'm starting to experience that myself with our kind of like model we've had for the last year or so, where we're like training people to, run outbound and make it work. I think one thing that I've had to learn the hard way is like, I always have the tendency to want to be the one to help because I feel like if I'm not the one to solve this problem, then they're not getting their money's worth because they're paying us to do it and blah, blah, blah. But more and more people will pipe in and say like, actually, you should do it this way. And like other people are helping each other and so on. Any thoughts on that? How have you kind of gotten around that issue?
I get the same feeling. Like
Yeah.
I'll, answer to everybody, but I'm like, so what do you think? So and so. And so I'll prompt people because I get to know the agency owners pretty intimately. And so, if you've got a problem with an HR issue or, a hiring issue or whatever, and I know, the person to the right of you on the Zoom grid has experience there, I'll prompt them for it. I don't want to suck the oxygen out of the room. I want other people to contribute. And the other cool thing that I do see is people want to contribute. And so I don't always have to pull people into it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that helps a lot. I think that a lot of the times it's like, and I've had been in masterminds where they set this up well, but like encouraging an environment of curiosity where the first thing people want to do is ask a number of follow-up questions. And then what you really learn is that the questions are where the value lives. It's not really in somebody giving advice.
Well, there's, and I'm drawing a blank on the methodology, but there's a methodology mindset behind that where if you ask 5 questions and they're all framed a certain way to a challenge, that collective alone pulls out what the solution should be.
Right.
So yeah, and we're in an industry of curiosity, and the only way an agency is going to find out what a client needs is for their own curiosity. So it's innate in us already to be curious about challenges and opposing solutions.
Yeah, for sure. I think, getting towards the end of our time, what are you excited about like over the next few months? What are you working on at Outside?
So I just launched a 2025 Blueprint for Success Mastermind program. I am through the roof excited about this and quite humbled by it. And it kind of came about through, I don't even know what, like a series of explorations and asking my own questions of like what would bring real value to agency owners. And so last year in Q4, I offered up free strategy sessions of let me help you look back to what worked in 2023 and set a vision for 2024. And maybe I had about a dozen or so 45-minute strategy sessions. And each one was awesome. No strings attached, let me help you. And so some of them turned into clients and some of them stayed friends, and that's totally cool too. This year it evolved into an 8-week intensive curriculum-driven program that I had not thought to have speakers on. And now I have 8 insane expert level speakers that I took a shot and I asked one person, I was like, hey, would you want to present on one of these? And they were like, absolutely. And then I had 3 people reach out to me after I announced it. And so it's just like really, really powerful people that are super smart, great presenters. And it's workshop driven where each week there's like pre-game homework and exercises. And the end result is like, here's your blueprint for what you want 2025 to look like. So that's what I'm super pumped about. The workshop launches October 16th.
Yeah, we'll send people where you want us to. And if they miss it, hopefully there'll be like some good recap content and they can get into the
Tons
next
of
one.
them. Yeah. The content's going to be insane off of it. And so we'll figure out how to get that out to the world.
Yeah, that sounds great, Steve. Well, this was a really fun conversation. Let's do it again before long.
Dan, thank you. I appreciate you asking me to be here and communicate with your listeners.